Welcome back to Company Grip Guitar. I am Ben, and today we're going to be looking at this, my 1970 Yamaha SG-5A. It's a particularly gloomy and rainy day in Los Angeles, so I apologize in advance if the light is fluctuating in and out and the levels are a little bit messed up as this video progresses, but we're just going to truck right on. Now, some people out there are going to disagree with what I'm about to say, but I believe the Yamaha SG-5A, this guitar here, was the first electric guitar from Yamaha that ever saw the light of day. Let me explain that a little bit further. If you go to Google right now and you type, what was the first electric guitar from Yamaha, it's no doubt going to say the SG-2 and the SG-3 were the first commercially released electric guitars from Yamaha. That is a very true thing. But in my studies of Japanese music, and particularly the Eleki movement, which was the surf music 60s scene that was rising in Japan, you find this guitar, the SG-5A, appears not 1, but 2 years before the SG-3 ever even saw store shelves. See, in the early 60s, the Ventures went to Japan and their music took off like wildfire. They attribute their success to instrumental music being a language that anybody could understand, and you could argue that maybe the Ventures were even more popular than the Beatles over there. Their music had a life-changing influence on one particular guitarist, and that was Takeshi Terauchi. The merging of this Western surf music with his natural guitar talent helped drive the Eleki movement, or the electric guitar boom in Japan. Eventually, Terry becomes known as the king of the electric guitar in Japan, and as such, different companies are reaching out to him wanting to get advice on how they can make their instruments better. Now, Terry wasn't just a musician, but a lot like his American and British contemporaries such as Elvis and Beatles, he also had a small acting career. One particular film series in Japan called the Wakadaisho series sees Terry showing his talents off in a film called Eleki no Wakadaisho, roughly translated the young guitar master.
若大将、さっきお客さんが来てましたよ。
What's believed to have happened is some of the team that was working on the Yamaha SG-2 and SG-3 had split off to work on a guitar for Terry. Now, after this guitar was seen in that movie, demand rose so much that Yamaha eventually released the SG-5 here and the SG-7, which was a more upscale version of this guitar. So yes, while on paper the SG-2 and SG-3 might be the official first commercial guitars from Yamaha, the Yamaha SG-5A actually made its appearance almost 2 years before those guitars ever saw the light of day. Yamaha actually has a history of releasing guitars that are influenced by the guitars that are being played by influential artists. So for example, if the Ventures were playing Focusrite guitars, that's when Yamaha came out with the SG-2 and the SG-3. Now, occasionally they vary from this pattern, and that's where you get the SG-5, which is kind of like on that same path, but just a little bit farther out there. Now, if you think this thing looks wild, they actually came out with a guitar that looks even more ridiculous, and it's actually known as the Flying Banana. Now, the nickname for the SG-5 and the SG-7s was the Flying Samurai guitar. As much as I looked to see where that nickname came from, I actually couldn't find it, so I'm going to guess it has something to do with just its wild design and this headstock that maybe looks like a samurai sword. So when it came down to picking one of Yamaha's first series of electric guitars, which is something I've been wanting for years, it was either going to be the SG-2, which was most famously played by Link Wray, this guy, or the SG-5A. I ultimately went with the 5A, obviously, because I think it was a little bit weirder, and I kind of like it a little bit better, to be honest with you. Now let's get into this guitar. So I bought this guitar in early 2023 for about $1,000. At the time I thought it was a really good deal, but as I've been looking over the guitar and discovering certain things and maybe even fixing little things, I've realized that maybe that wasn't the best deal. Now, I don't know the guy that sold it to me, so I don't know if his intentions were deceptive on purpose or if he had no idea what was going on, but the first thing that was misleading is he had told me it was a 1966 model. It's actually a 1970 model, and the only way I could tell that was by the serial number on it, which is actually printed here on the 22nd fret. Now, it is possible that he just didn't see the first digit, and it is true, if you take away the first digit, the serial number would indicate a 1966 model, but I don't know. I mean, I'm not even an expert on these guitars by any means, and I noticed the digit, and that immediately placed it as a 1970. So that was the first thing I noticed. As this review goes on, I'll point out maybe one or two other things that are a little bit interesting about it. But anyway, $1,000 is what I paid for it. If you go to Reverb right now, you can find them for about I don't know, 1,400 bucks up to 2,500 bucks, depending on the condition, if they have the case, if they have the original pickups, that sort of thing. Now this is the candy blue finish, but there are, I believe, 3 other official finishes for this guitar. One of them is the coral red, the pearl white, and the sunburst. Now I have seen other ones out there that are different colors. Hard to say, you know, the guitar has a 65-year history if those were repainted or maybe they were one-offs. Who's to say, really? So as you can see, this guitar has quite the offset to it. I'd say maybe one of the weirder offsets of the 60s, and they had some very weird looking guitars back then. In terms of what the body is made of, I've seen a number of different woods listed. I've seen sen ash and I've seen alder and a couple others. I'm guessing it's probably one of those first 2 though, as those were popular woods for guitar bodies in the 60s in Japan. Now in terms of the actual design and functionality of it, you do have a belly carve here on the back, which is pretty nice. It actually helps when you're playing it sitting down because, as you can see, the butt goes right up there into your shoulder, so it's nice to have it lean over just a bit so you get a little bit better access. But it does sit pretty nice in your lap. You know, the fact that this side of the body is taller than this side actually puts the guitar up quite a bit, and it's really kind of comfortable to sit and play. Now if you looked at the Flying Banana guitar that I listed earlier, I have no idea how anybody plays one of those unless you're standing, but I'd like to get my hands on one and try it someday. Moving up to the neck here, we've got a bound maple neck here, and it's actually a really nice looking neck. I don't know if you can see some of the flame or the striping in it. It's certainly very smooth. It's got 55 years of play in it. Then we've got a rosewood fretboard here as well, which is also in pretty immaculate condition, not too much wear at all that I can find. Now the neck itself is a little bit thinner than I'm used to. Our nuts coming in here at 1.63 inches, which is pretty thin. The actual measurements of the frets here, I'm getting a 0.83 on the first fret, and at the 12th fret we're getting a 0.92. Now the radius of this fretboard is a very round 7.25, and I haven't played one of those in a while. I do like the way that this one feels. It's just like everything is pretty tight and compact, but it is easy to play. A couple things to mention, we do have the 0 fret on this guitar, which is something that I've always liked. I don't know why more guitars don't do it. Now it's impossible to talk about this guitar without mentioning this headstock, and this is certainly a unique design for sure. I think the biggest bummer about it is you're not going to be hanging it on any wall stands. Other than that, this neck is one solid piece from the tip all the way down here to where it connects to the body, with the exception of a little 1/2-inch block that they glue to it right there at the heel. I don't know why they couldn't make that work or not, but I've looked at several different examples of the SG-5A. It seems like all of them have that additional block there. Maybe it has something to do with the way that it actually attaches to the guitar or not. Now speaking of the way that it attaches, in my NAMM videos a couple weeks ago I mentioned that I was excited to see the Eastman Fuller Tone series of guitars that had a long neck tenon bolt-on design. Well, maybe Yamaha beat them by about 60 years, because you can see here that just because the neck ends right here at the 22nd fret, it actually extends another couple of inches underneath the neck pickup there where it finally bolts to the body. And that's great because then you get really good fret access with the body meeting the neck right here at about the 20th frets. Now speaking of these frets, these are super low profile. These are coming in at 24 thousandths, which is about half the height of what you would find on a modern day Les Paul or a American Professional Stratocaster. I should also point out that the scale of this guitar, despite its really long appearance, is actually 24 3/4 inches, making it match almost, but not all, Gibson guitars. A couple more things about the neck here. Despite its wild appearance, we've got some relatively tame looking round acrylic dot inlays lining the neck there. Going up here to the top, we've got, of course, the Yamaha logo, and one of my favorite things here, we've got this tiny metal medallion here at the end of the headstock here that has the tri-tuning fork logo from Yamaha. For the hardware, first and foremost, we've got the strap buttons. Now, I believe the strap button on the bottom is the original strap button, but it has been moved up about a 1/2 inch because the original one apparently was worn out, or maybe somebody had installed strap locks and it enlarged the hole too much. Couldn't tell you why, but that is what I believe is the original strap button, unlike the one up here at the top of the guitar, which looks like it's just a generic replacement strap button. And speaking of that, you might be asking, well, how is the neck dive on a guitar that's that weird? Let's check it out. Not too bad at all. Now, a lot of people say, wait, you didn't do the neck dive test when it's sitting on your lap, which is not really something I've ever really worried about, but in case you're wondering, yeah, it's a little back heavy, but it's not bad. Now, moving up from the strap buttons, we get to the Yamaha exclusive tremolo system. Now this system is clearly taken its inspiration from the Jazzmaster system, but it is quite a bit different in how it's designed, and I would argue that maybe it's a little bit better and more efficient at what it's supposed to do. So what we've got is a similar system in that the trem arm guides the movement of the strings. So whereas the Jazzmaster system is kind of all built into one plate that you attach to a cavity on the face of the guitar, this is actually just a plate here. But instead of the spring being built into the unit, it actually rests against a round plate sunk into the body, giving you a longer spring and what I would consider a more gradual and smoother breath to your tremolo movement. Now I can't not mention the absolute butcher job that you're looking at right here. That is not how these guitars came. What I think happened is somebody took this original Yamaha system out and for whatever reason replaced it with another system. And funny enough, if you look at those holes there, they line up perfectly with a Jazzmaster trem system. That also explains why they gouged out the wood to make room for that extra spring plate. Thankfully, the plate for the Yamaha system pretty much perfectly covers up all the additional holes, but needless to say, I was not pleased when I first discovered that. One thing that you do read about a lot is some problems with the trem arm mounting system. A lot of them are missing this sleeve, so it won't pinch the arm in a way that you can set the arm where you want it, or even lock it into the guitar. Fortunately, mine had all the pieces, but they needed to be adjusted to make it work right, and that's when I discovered the beautiful butcher job that somebody did down there. Moving on to the bridge here, I think this is an area where Yamaha also did a lot better than the original Jazzmaster. So when you look at the Jazzmaster saddles, it looks like machine screws that are kind of cut into sections and the strings run across those. Those saddles are then attached to a plate which has posts that are going into these like metal thimbles on the guitar. And the bridge itself has a tendency to rock forward and backwards. Sometimes it will rock forward and lock that way, or maybe not lock, but get stuck that way, or maybe rock back and get stuck that way, which can mess with your intonation. The way that they did this system, I think, is quite a bit better. So for starters, they actually just installed rollers for the strings so they can move freely, and all these rollers are working, thankfully. And then the actual plate itself that these are mounted to is sunk into the body over these really heavy-duty springs that don't move very much. It does have a tendency to dampen, but it doesn't move, and the springs are so strong that it always returns to the original position, which I think is just a better system overall. Moving on to the pickups here, it's not the most confusing thing, but there's a lot of misinformation on the internet about what exactly is going on here, what these pickups are, and hopefully I can clear that up a little bit. So first off, this is not a humbucker, which I've seen referred to 100 times as the bridge humbucker. It's not a humbucker. It doesn't have any hum canceling. There's no hum to be bucked. It is two separate single coils, and this is also a single coil in the neck here. Now, these are three identical single coil pickups, with the exception that the bridge pickup has an additional magnet underneath it to give it just a little bit more meat to the sound. That's the first piece of the puzzle. Now the next piece of the puzzle is these two pickups are a give and take sort of relationship. They're a companion pickup. So this knob here is called the balancer. That's where you would set the balance between these two single coils. So if I have, say, turned all the way clockwise, the bridgemost pickup is giving me 100% of the sound, and the next pickup up from that is giving me 0. If I move it to the middle, I'm getting 50% from one, 50% from the other. And completely counterclockwise, I'm getting 100% of the sound from the upper bottom pickup and 0 from the bridgemost pickup. And you can dial that in however you want. You know, you could have it be 30-70 or 28-72, whatever you want. It doesn't really matter, but the important way to look at it is this companion pickup down here acts as your bridge pickup. So whatever your ratio is, that's your bridge pickup. This is your neck pickup. You've got a three-way selector here, just like on a Les Paul. So in the bridgemost position, you're only using the companion pickup, regardless of whatever the ratio is here. In the middle, you're using your neck and your companion pickup, and you're still free to set your ratio to whatever you want for the companion pickup. Then once you're in the neck position, it's just the neck pickup, and the balancer control won't affect your sound at all. It's actually a pretty easy thing to understand once you have a grasp of what's exactly going on there, but I do see a lot of articles that are like, the system is so confusing, who knows what's going on? Well, there it is. I hope I explained it clearly enough. Now let's take a look at these pickups themselves. So I actually tried as hard as I could to find any information on them. I couldn't tell you much about what kind of magnets we're using or any of that sort of information, but I can give you the actual readings of these pickups. In the bridgemost position here, I'm getting a 9.45. Up here in the neck, I'm actually getting a 9.87. And in the middle position, which is the neck and the companion pickup, I'm getting a 4.90. Then moving on to the controls here, we've got the already mentioned three-way selector switch, a master volume, a master tone, and the balancer knob, all mounted to this age-worn 3-ply white, black, white pickguard. Now let's take it off and look underneath these controls. So here's a look at the electronics. Looks like it's all original here. We've got the volume and tone. These are 500K pots, and then we've got a dual 250K pot for the balancer. Looks like we got ceramic capacitors as expected. Really nothing too complicated. It's just a unique design. Moving on with the hardware, we've already talked about the frets and how they're super low, 24 thousandths. Just beyond that, we get to a string tree, which is for the E, B, and G strings. And then we get to the Yamaha branded tuners. Now these tuners are measuring in at 15:1 tuning ratio, which is pretty decent. They actually work just fine, especially for how old they are. I would say my biggest pet peeve with them is just how weird the actual tuning knobs look, but I guess on a guitar like this, that's to be expected. Lastly, we've got on the backside our Yamaha branded neck plate. Now if we take this plate off, you'll notice that underneath it is where we would adjust our truss rod. Like I mentioned earlier, despite its weird looks, it's actually pretty comfortable to play. It sits in your lap very well, stands pretty nice, it doesn't really rock one way or the other. We've got the belly carve there, which adds a little bit of comfort, and especially in this high butt area of the guitar. The guitar is just a little bit heavier than I would have originally suspected. This one comes in at 7.71 pounds, or about 7 pounds and a little bit over 11 ounces. So it's got a little bit of meat to it, but it's certainly not like a Les Paul or its 1970s brother, the SG-1500, which I'll be doing that review probably in a couple months here. Anyway, I'm going to move on to the sound test here. As always, I'll put all the controls here so that you can follow along and see exactly what settings I've got going on. Also try to incorporate the balancer knob here too, so you can get an auditory example of how that sounds. I'm sure that'll be a pain in the butt to edit, but that'll be my problem and not yours. Now, if the sound is distorted, I'm using either the Wampler Tumnus pedal or the Joyo American Sound pedal. I'll have little icons for those as well, so you can see which one is being used, if not both of them. The sound will be going through a Bugera V5 amp mic'd into my PreSonus Studio One DAW. If you hear delay or reverb, I'm adding those in the editing software as I see fit, really. All right, let's get into it. that's my review of the Yamaha SG-5A. I'm a big fan of this guitar. Love that it's got a shorter scale, so it's a scale that I'm more used to playing. I also think that it sounds pretty decent. I think the neck pickup has a really nice chewiness to it, especially for these single coils. And then along that note, the bridge also has a little bit more meat to it. I don't find it as twangy as what you might find on a Stratocaster or a Telecaster. So I think for me, this is a better sounding fit in my arsenal of guitars, if you want to call it that, than some of the Fenders. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I'm also curious what you think about the balancer knob. You know, is it necessary, or is it just doing something different for the sake of doing something different at a time when Yamaha really needed to stand out amongst all the competition that was out there, both foreign and domestic, for them anyway. Well, that about sums up my review of the Yamaha SG-5A. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully, at the very least, this video can serve as a reference material for anybody else that's maybe looking to buy an SG-5A or looking to do a little bit of work on theirs, because believe it or not, there's actually not a lot of information out there on early 60s Yamaha guitars. Even the Yamaha website itself has a little bit of revisionist history of the dates just to make things, I think, fit in a little better with the early Yamaha storyline. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, consider clicking the like button, or better yet, consider subscribing. Anyway, I look forward to the comments, look forward to hearing what you guys think about this guitar, or maybe you have some corrections to the information that I've presented here. All of it is welcome. All right, I will talk to you next time.